I was never meant to belong. Not in the way my brother did. Not in the way my parents made it clear you had to perform to be loved. I'm not talking about talent. I'm talking about performance. The kind that fits into frames, brunches, polite gossip, and last names embroidered on monogram towels. My name is Marlene. Not a common name, not a forgettable one either. But to my family, I was background noise. I grew up knowing my mother's approval came in teaspoons. My brother Graham, he got it by the bucket. If he tripped over his own ego and somehow didn't bleed, it was called resilience. If I aced something, don't brag, Marlene, it's just school. So I learned early how to disappear. But this story? This isn't about staying quiet, because I never imagined my daughter's baby shower would be the battlefield, and I certainly didn't expect her to be the one wielding the truth like a scalpel. And before I tell you how she shattered generations of lies with just one sentence, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. Back to the beginning, I became a mother at 21. No ring, no plan. Just a stubborn streak, a scholarship to nursing school, and the kind of bone-deep love I'd never seen growing up. My daughter, Jolene, was born during finals week. I took my last pharmacology test with stitches still tender and a nursing bra under my scrubs. No one came to the hospital from my side of the family. My father sent a text, "Congrats. Hope you've thought this through." I hadn't. But I knew one thing, I would never let Jolene feel what I had, like an add-on, a tolerated inconvenience. My mom offered to watch her for a few weeks while I studied for boards. I declined. I didn't trust her maternal instincts. Those instincts had always been curiously selective. At family dinners, those tension-frosted meals where everyone performs, Jolene and I were always seated at the end of the table near the kitchen door. Once when she was 8, she asked me why Nana never hugged her the way she hugged Graham's sons. I made a joke about Nana's bad back. Then I cried in the car. Quietly. Still, I showed up. I brought store-bought pies I couldn't afford, smiled through microaggressions disguised as jokes, and listened to my siblings praise each other's mediocrity like it was nobility. What kept me sane was work. I became a nurse practitioner. Long shifts, scarred hands, exhausted eyes, but I loved it. I loved being needed, useful, and skilled in ways that didn't require applause. I could reset bones, spot strokes, deliver bad news with grace. I knew how to carry pain. Jolene grew up in clinic break rooms and on secondhand couches. She read early, talked late, and once built a solar oven from a pizza box and tin foil. My daughter is brilliant in that unshowy, sharp-edged way, like a blade wrapped in velvet. By the time she was 14, I'd saved enough to start a trust fund. Not much, but it was hers. Every bonus, every overtime hour, I slipped into that account like I was planting something. My plan was simple. Jolene would never have to beg for help the way I had. And then came the invitation. A baby shower for Graham's third child, hosted by my parents at their country house. Blue-themed, formal attire. No +1s unless cleared in advance. I almost threw it out, but Jolene found it on the counter and raised an eyebrow. "We weren't going to go?" she asked. I shrugged. She looked at me like I was running from something. And maybe I was. "Let's go," she said. "I want to see them." Just that. Not with malice, but with something else. A calm curiosity, like a scientist revisiting a failed experiment. I said yes, mostly because her voice held the kind of stillness that scares you into listening. So now I'm standing in front of the mirror, trying to decide if this dress still fits around the waist. Jolene is zipping up her pale yellow sundress in the hallway. She's 16 now, taller than me, eyes that don't flinch. Today we're walking into the lion's den. But I don't think they realize one of the lions has grown wings. I didn't grow up invisible. I was made invisible. Methodically, by a family that curated its own mythology and trimmed away the parts that didn't fit. My success was never loud enough, never posed well enough for their picture frames. I remember being 10 and winning the school-wide science fair with a hand-built model of a water filtration system. My mom arrived late, looked at it once and said, "Well, it's not exactly artistic, is it?" Meanwhile, Graham got a B- on his social studies paper and was treated to dinner at the Hillside Inn, where reservations needed 2 weeks' notice. It became a pattern. High school valedictorian? They told me not to mention it at the Easter brunch because it might make Graham feel behind. Full ride to nursing school? My dad said, "Free doesn't mean prestigious." "First published paper in a medical journal?" No one replied to the email. I used to keep a little journal of all the moments they dismissed, thinking maybe if I organized them they'd sting less. That didn't work. My sister-in-law Darcy once said during a Thanksgiving toast, "Graham's the first in the family to really lead. He's got that executive presence." She said this as Graham was between jobs and living in their guest house while exploring opportunities. At the same time, I was working night shifts at the ER, raising Jolene, and putting myself through a doctorate program in advanced clinical practice. But to them, none of that translated to executive presence. To them, I was practical, capable, responsible. All those words that sound like compliments but are really placeholders for invisible. Jolene noticed. She always noticed, even when I tried to hide it. When she was around 9, she asked why we never stayed the night during Christmas like Uncle Graham and Aunt Darcy did. I said we had to feed the cat. We didn't have a cat. My parents' house wasn't hostile. It was curated, and I was a glitch in their curated feed. A reminder of something they didn't want to claim. They were always good at turning the mundane into grandeur. When Graham finally launched his boutique finance firm after 3 failed startups, my father gave a speech at his office blessing party about the legacy of grit and determination in the Jennings bloodline. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He never gave a speech for me. Not when I graduated, not when I was certified, not when I opened my first solo practice. My achievements didn't warrant rituals. They weren't glamorous, they weren't loud, and I was never going to be their reflection. But the cruelest part wasn't what they overlooked, it was what they erased. When Jolene turned 13, I'd managed to quietly build up her educational fund to nearly $40,000. Enough for a strong head start. I kept it modest, invested smartly, moved it into a custodial account under her name. 3 months later, I logged in, and it was gone. All but $700. I called the bank. Apparently there had been an authorized family transfer. Documents filed through a financial advisor my parents had referred me to years ago, one I'd signed over limited access to when setting up the account. He was connected to Graham's firm. They had liquidated my daughter's fund. When I confronted my father, he blinked slowly and said, "That money was sitting idle. Graham needed runway. You should be proud." Proud. As if I'd contributed to the family legacy, against my will. I was too stunned to respond. I remember standing in my parking lot in scrubs soaked from a night shift, phone against my cheek, feeling the weight of betrayal settle in my bones. That night, Jolene came home from school and found me silent in the kitchen, eyes dry but hollow. She asked what was wrong. I lied. I said the bank made a mistake. She didn't press. She just wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "I'll build my own fund one day." That was the moment I stopped waiting for my family to see me. I stopped performing for an audience that never clapped. But still, we kept showing up. Not because I wanted their approval, but because I wanted Jolene to understand, you can be stronger than bitterness. You can sit at a table that never saved you a seat, and still leave full. Until now. This time, something is different. Jolene's not just watching, she's planning something. She's quiet, but there's a calculation in her eyes, a calm I've learned to fear and admire. She's not going to let this shower pass like the rest. And for once, I'm not stopping her. I never intended to build an empire. It started out of necessity, out of exhaustion, out of standing in a supply closet at 2 a.m. during a double shift, holding a broken glucometer and thinking, there has to be a better way. The system was a mess. Clinics were underfunded, staff burned out, patients falling through the cracks. I watched single mothers skip follow-ups because of copays, elderly patients ration meds, diabetic teens navigating treatment with nothing but YouTube tutorials. And no one in my family cared. They talked about investments and IPOs, but not about real people. They had no interest in what I did, unless it involved shaming me for missing another family brunch or asking if I'd ever thought about opening a wellness blog. So I stopped trying to explain and started building. I partnered with 2 other nurse practitioners, Mara and Luke, who had the same fire in their eyes and the same shadows under them. We started renting a single exam room behind a laundromat. Not fancy, but clean, private, ours. We saw patients who couldn't get appointments elsewhere. We ran labs on budget machines, negotiated with suppliers, and reinvested everything. I remember walking to the clinic in the rain, Jolene holding my thermos, reading flashcards out loud while I tried to memorize clinical guidelines between puddles. I can still hear her voice spelling eosinophil. We called it Northbridge Health Collective. At first it was just paperwork and elbow grease, but over the next 3 years something extraordinary happened. We grew, fast, because we listened, because we didn't judge, because we stayed open late and charged what people could pay. Word spread like wildfire. We got grants, then we got noticed. A local investor came in with a proposal to expand. He'd lost his wife to a preventable misdiagnosis, and our model hit a nerve. We built a second location in a converted post office, then a third inside a community center. Suddenly, we weren't scrappy anymore. We were disruptive and we were profitable, just not in the way my family ever measured. No yachts, no stock tips. But lives changed. People remembered our names, brought us tamales and crocheted gifts. One patient left us a handwritten note. "You saved my daughter's life. I'll never forget you." I didn't hang it in my house, I carried it in my wallet. Still, I said nothing to my parents, because I knew. If they knew, they'd twist it. They'd make it about the optics, the potential connections to Graham's firm, the great press opportunity for their social circle. So I let them think I was just a nurse practitioner doing too much. They liked that version. It made me easier to dismiss. But privately, I structured Northbridge into a trust. Jolene had equity, my name was on the founding documents, and my partners were family in every way that counted. I had created something, quietly, carefully, that no one could take, except for one thing, that damn fun they stole. Even in the midst of building something powerful, that theft haunted me. Not just the money, but what it represented, that even when I protected, they found a way in. That my daughter's future, her independence, had been siphoned away in silence. I didn't tell Jolene. I kept trying to refill it, bit by bit. But the economy turned. One of our major donors paused funding. My timeline shifted, and the guilt settled in like a tenant I couldn't evict. Jolene never asked about it, but I saw the way she checked her banking app sometimes. The quiet calculations in her head. She's always been good at numbers. She got that from me. Then last week, the phone rang. Mara called. She was breathless. "Guess who's buying out the old lakeside pavilion?" I paused. "That private yacht club your family always brags about?" "Yep," she said. "They're liquidating. New owners want in on community healthcare meets lifestyle wellness. Guess who the lead bidder is?" I sat down. Slowly. "You're kidding." "Not even a little. And guess what else? If we buy the pavilion, we also inherit all active corporate memberships tied to it, including your families." I didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. I hadn't told anyone this yet. Not even Jolene. But I knew we were about to become very visible. And not on their terms. Still, I kept it to myself. I wasn't ready. Not until the paperwork was signed. Not until it was real. Because the baby shower was coming up. And for once, I wasn't going to walk in holding silence. I didn't sleep the night before the shower. I told myself it was the caffeine, too much cold brew during patient charting, but truthfully, it was something older. Restless, like a shadow you used to outrun. A younger version of me kept whispering questions. What if they embarrass you again? What if Jolene gets hurt? What if they find a new way to remind you you're not one of them? But Jolene, she slept like stone. At 16, she carries more truth than I ever did at 30. The morning of the shower, the sunlight in our kitchen hit different, warmer somehow, like it knew something we didn't. Jolene made pancakes without asking. I was too nervous to eat. "You gonna wear the blue or the rust?" she asked, flipping a perfect golden circle. "Blue," I said. "It blends in better." She smiled without looking at me. "Why would you want to blend in now?" I didn't answer. She wore the rust. Burnt orange, tailored, sharp as her wit. Her curls were pulled back in a braid I couldn't have done with 3 sets of hands. As we got into the car, I clutched my phone like it was a weapon. The acquisition deal for the Lakeside Pavilion wasn't signed yet, but I knew it was close. Our investor had said he'd get back to us this weekend. That meant today. At any moment. I wasn't sure if I was hoping it would come through before or after the baby shower. The drive was mostly quiet. I let Jolene DJ. She picked Nina Simone and Florence plus the Machine, then ended on Billie Eilish. The girl's a vibe scientist. The house was exactly how I remembered. Overgrown rose bushes cut into submission, stone lions at the gate, shutters that had been painted the same shade of colonial beige since I was 10. There were cars already lined down the drive, BMWs, Teslas, one ostentatious McLaren that I was sure Graham rented. Inside, everything was blue, powder blue, champagne flutes on gold trays, personalized cookies with Graham and Darcy's miracle baby iced in cursive. Everything screamed curated elegance, except the energy. That part felt fragile. I saw Aunt Rosemary first. Her face tightened just slightly before the fake smile clicked into place. Marlene, and my goodness, Jolene, you're a young woman now. She gave a thin hug and added, so glad you could make it. We weren't sure if you got the invite in time. Translation: we hoped you didn't. Jolene smiled, too sweetly. We made sure not to miss it. I squeezed her shoulder. She knew. She knew what this was. We walked into the sunroom where the gift table was an explosion of designer bags and silver tissue. The family circled like crows in pastel. Mom approached next, flanked by Darcy. You look tired, she said by way of greeting. I run a clinic, I replied. She sniffed, then turned to Jolene. And you, how's community college treating you? Jolene tilted her head. I'm 16, Nana, still in high school. Oh, Mom blinked. Well, that's nice. Are you doing okay in school? Top 1% in the state, she said calmly. Scholarship eligible for 4 different STEM tracks. I'll choose after I rebuild my college fund. The silence was immediate. Thick. I said nothing. Let the words hang, let them wonder. Darcy laughed, but it cracked at the end. Oh, Jolene, you're always so intense. Jolene blinked. I'm deliberate. Then came the games. Onesie decorating, name the baby food. I held Jolene's hand during the worst of it. Watched my parents beam at Graham's every sentence like he was narrating the book of Genesis. Then they brought out the toast. Everyone was handed a flute. My dad tapped his. Family, he said. There's no greater gift. And today we celebrate legacy, growth, and what it means to support the next generation. The bile rose in my throat. We've always believed in nurturing potential, he continued, even when it's difficult, even when it comes in unexpected packages. That's what love is, sacrifice. I looked at Jolene, her jaw was tight. And in that spirit, my mom added, we've made a difficult but necessary decision as a family to consolidate our future investments. Moving forward, we'll be focusing our support where it can yield the greatest returns. For Graham, for the baby, for the name. No one looked at us, but every word was pointed like a knife. And of course, she smiled toward me now, Marlene and Jolene have always been independent. We trust they'll continue to chart their own course, as they've always preferred. The room nodded. Toasted. And just like that, we were officially disowned. But Jolene didn't flinch, she raised her glass too. To legacies, she said, built with consent, not theft. Then she slipped me her phone under the table. One notification flashed. Wire confirmed, $3.4 million settled, Northbridge acquisition complete. Below it, congratulations, Dr. Jennings, the pavilion is yours. If contempt had a scent, it would have been the lavender room spray wafting through that sunroom, sweet, choking, and trying too hard to cover rot. After the toast, there was a moment, brief and brittle, when I thought someone might say something kind. Maybe an aunt, maybe an old family friend. But instead, there were nods, quick sips, avoided glances, the kind of silence that only exists when everyone agrees on a lie but no one wants to say it out loud. We stood there like party crashers in our own bloodline. Jolene didn't blink, but I saw it in the way she twisted the napkin in her hand, tightly, methodically. Darcy was the first to break the hush. She approached, high heels tapping like tiny gavel strikes, smile sharp enough to cut butter. We hope you're not taking any of that personally. Your parents just, well, they've had to make some tough calls lately. We're all doing the best we can. Jolene turned slowly. Interesting. I don't recall giving permission to reallocate my education fund to tough calls. Darcy laughed, but her mascara twitched. Sweetheart, sometimes adults have to make complex decisions. Money is just a tool. Jolene's mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile. So is betrayal. Guess it runs in the family. Before Darcy could fire back, Graham arrived with his third mimosa and an exaggerated sigh. What's with all the tension? This is a celebration, right? He gave me a once-over. Like he was expecting an apology to crawl out of my mouth. Glad you came, sis. Didn't think you'd still show up after all the shifts in direction. shifts in direction. That's what he called stealing from my daughter and cutting us off in public? I held his stare. Funny, I was just thinking the same. You've always been good at changing lanes, especially when someone else builds the road. He chuckled, smug. Hey, it's business, you know how this game works. You build, you pivot, you scale. No hard feelings. None, I said calmly. In fact, I'm here to celebrate too. Darcy raised an eyebrow. Oh? Jolene looked at me and gave the subtlest nod. My hand slipped into my bag. I pulled out an envelope. Just a small gesture, I said, handing it to Graham. For the baby, should set them up nicely. He opened it, frowning, pulled out the papers, read the first line, froze. His lips moved silently over the title, Transfer of Property, Lakeside Pavilion Holdings, effective immediately. His pupils shrank. What is this? I stepped forward, voice steady. A welcome gift. You see, Northbridge just acquired the pavilion, the club, the facilities, and every corporate membership attached, including yours. He looked at me like I'd just dropped a lit match on his silk tie. You bought the pavilion? No, Jolene cut in. We bought the pavilion. Gasps fluttered like moths. My mother stood now. You're bluffing. I tilted my head. Ask your broker. Dad grabbed the papers from Graham's hands, scanned them, his face drained color like a cartoon villain. I could have sworn I heard the crinkle of pride breaking in his pocket. You can't just... We can, I said. And we did. Effective immediately, we own the club, and with it, the power to revoke memberships. I looked around the room, letting the implications land one by one, which we'll be doing, selectively. There was a beat of silence, so pure it rang. Then Jolene stepped forward. You stole from a child, you lied to her mother, and you thought you'd get away with it because we didn't make a scene. We don't need a seat at your table. She leaned in closer. We own the table now. Darcy blinked rapidly. This is childish, vindictive. No, I said softly. It's closure. I turned to my mother. Her lips were tight, her eyes narrowed, not in confusion but recognition. She'd always suspected I had more power than I let on. Now she saw it. You're welcome to visit, I said, as paying guests. Then Jolene and I walked out. No storming, no screaming, just heels on hardwood, slow and deliberate. Let them keep their champagne. We were done drinking from cracked glasses. Outside the sun was still warm. The car beeped as we approached. Jolene didn't say anything at first, just opened the door and got in like it was any other Saturday. Once inside she turned to me. You okay? I looked at her, this teenager with fire in her voice and thunder in her calm, and for the first time in years I felt completely okay. I am now, I said. She pulled out her phone again and grinned. Guess what? What? She showed me a text from Mara, investor secured, pavilion purchase backed for phase 2 expansion. You're going national, Doc, get ready. We stared at the screen for a second before Jolene whispered, Damn, that's poetic. We drove off, with the windows down, no destination, just momentum. The silence that followed didn't feel like peace. Not at first, it felt raw. Like stepping out of a burning building and realizing your skin is still intact, but you can smell the singe. My phone vibrated non-stop for 2 hours after we left the baby shower. Calls from Mom, Dad, Graham, and a couple from Darcy disguised under a contact name she hadn't realized I still had saved. Darcy, don't answer ever. None of them got through. I turned my phone off. Jolene and I spent the rest of the day in sweatpants, watching reruns of the Great British Bake Off, while demolishing Thai takeout and occasionally high-fiving whenever we remembered what we'd done. But by midnight, the ache came, because power doesn't cancel grief, and revenge, no matter how calmly executed, doesn't erase what you never got. I went outside with a glass of water and sat on the porch. The wind was cool, the kind that smells like wet pavement and change. Jolene came out, wrapped in a blanket, and sat beside me without a word. You okay? I asked, this time really meaning it. She shrugged. They always said I was dramatic when I cried, and cold when I didn't. So I guess now they get to pick which version of me they hate more. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the most brutally honest thing I'd ever heard. They don't hate you, I said. They erased me, Mom, she replied. That's worse. I reached for her hand. You did something brave today. I want you to know that. And I want you to understand, this doesn't mean we'll never feel the weight again. It just means we stopped carrying it for them. She leaned on my shoulder, and for a moment, it was enough, until the next morning. That's when the public part began. The pavilion acquisition hit the Community Business Journal within 24 hours. They used a picture of me and Mara from a local health fair, all ponytails and sweat-streaked scrubs, holding a toddler between us while someone handed out flyers. Northbridge Health expands with Lakeside Pavilion takeover. Founders redefining community wellness. The article barely mentioned my family, but it mentioned the memberships, the revocations, the shift in ownership. The ripple was immediate. By noon, I'd received 4 voicemails from my father's advisory team and 2 polite but panicked messages from my mother about clearing up a misunderstanding. One even said, "We don't want the media twisting this. Come over and we can talk through next steps together, as a family." That word. Family. Suddenly it was worth something again. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with Mara and Luke in our makeshift boardroom, which used to be a daycare classroom and still had tiny chairs stacked in the corner. We finalized plans for Phase 2 of expansion, converting the pavilion's banquet hall into a mobile clinic HQ, building wellness pods for low-income seniors, and offering weekend STEM labs for local teens. Jolene's idea. The irony was delicious. The same building my family once used to host exclusive wine tastings would now be a place where kids could learn how to code and check their blood sugar in the same hour. But even as the dream came together, the ache in my chest hadn't left. I found myself hovering over my phone again, not to call them, just to wait, to see if someone would say the words I still craved. "We were wrong. We saw you. We just didn't know how to love you." But of course, no such words came. What did come was a letter, handwritten, no return address, just my name on the envelope in my mother's distinct cursive. Inside, it was 5 lines long. "Marlene, you've made yourself very clear. I hope you're satisfied. Your father and I will no longer reach out." There was no signature, just space. The kind of coldness that doesn't slam the door, but disappears behind it. I folded it quietly and placed it in a drawer beside an old photo of me holding Jolene at her first birthday. Cake on her cheeks, her tiny hand grabbing my nose. That letter didn't break me, because something deeper had already been rebuilt. They could disown me all they wanted. But I had already claimed myself, fully, loudly, and I wasn't going back. It was poetic, really, how the moment of my deepest humiliation became the moment the ground shifted underneath them. When Jolene passed me her phone at that baby shower, I didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or stand on a chair and deliver a TED Talk. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer velocity of justice finally arriving. I looked down at the message again. Wire confirmed, $3.4 million settled, Northbridge acquisition complete. Congratulations, Dr. Jennings. The pavilion is yours. In that instant, everything slowed. The clinking of champagne glasses, the hollow laughter, the background playlist of instrumental Beyoncé, it all faded to static. I looked around the room, saw the faces that once smirked while pretending I was just another tired nurse, and realized something unshakable. I had never needed them. But they had needed me quiet. I rose to my feet, calmly placing the flute of untouched champagne on a side table shaped like a baby rattle. "I have an announcement," I said, not raising my voice. It didn't matter. The room quieted like someone had flipped a switch. Darcy's eyes narrowed. My mother tilted her head in that way she did when trying to predict the weather of a conversation. Graham kept chewing his fancy little macaron, oblivious. "Some of you may have heard that the Lakeside Pavilion changed hands this week," I began. A flicker of confusion. My uncle straightened. My father stiffened like a dog sensing thunder. "Well," I said, "as of 5 minutes ago, the ink is dry. My partners and I, through Northbridge Health, are now the full owners of this property and its associated memberships." There it was. The ripple. "Effective immediately," I continued, "we'll be converting the facility into a hybrid wellness and education center. Accessible, affordable, community first." Mara and Luke had asked me not to go full scorched earth, but this wasn't vengeance. This was reclamation. This was me planting a flag on the territory they told me I never had the right to walk. Graham scoffed. "Is this a joke?" "Check your inbox," Jolene said, stepping beside me. "Your corporate membership has already been revoked. You're welcome to reapply during our next open enrollment. Background check required." That's when it really hit them. The depth of it. The permanence. This wasn't petty. This was infrastructure. My father's voice was tight. "You're turning a place of tradition into a charity?" I met his stare. "No. We're turning it into a future. Darcy hissed, "You've humiliated us." Jolene laughed, softly. "You did that all by yourselves." There was nothing left to say, not from us, anyway. We turned and walked out. Just like that. Not hurried, not triumphant. Just finished. It wasn't until we reached the car that I exhaled. Jolene leaned back in the passenger seat, eyes closed, soaking in the last of the sunlight. "You looked like a Bond villain in there," she said, grinning. "I felt like I was going to throw up," I replied. "But you didn't. You stood there, you told the truth." I nodded. "And you?" She shrugged. "I've been waiting years to say it. Felt good." It wasn't just about revenge, it wasn't even about justice. It was about finally stepping out of the shadows they'd shoved us into and realizing the light was always ours to stand in. That night, the calls started. Again. First from a cousin, then an aunt, then, oddly, from Graham's wife. She left a voicemail that said, "I didn't know about the fund. I swear, if I had, well, I hope we can talk." But that wasn't the one that broke me. The one that did was from my sister. The one who had always stayed quiet, always played neutral. "Marlene, I know I wasn't there for you, and I'm not asking for a pass, but I saw what you did. I saw Jolene. I had no idea. I'm proud of you." I played that message twice. Then I cried. Not out of sadness, but because it's strange how powerful even a whisper of validation can feel after a lifetime of silence. But by then I didn't need it. Because we had already won. Not through applause, but through truth. Through action. And I finally understood. The phone call wasn't what changed everything. It was what I did with it. I used to fantasize about dramatic exits, mic drops, slammed doors, gasps trailing in my wake. But when it finally happened, it didn't feel like drama. It felt like closure so clean it didn't echo. Leaving that baby shower wasn't a climax. It was a release. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. They say revenge is best served cold. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted to be free of the knot in my chest I'd carried for 16 years, the one that came from trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I wasn't valuable. I didn't slam the door. I built a new house. A week later, the fallout began. Not in rage, but in quiet, bureaucratic dismay, the kind that devastates status-obsessed families. Club memberships revoked, local board affiliations questioned. A news blog published a piece titled, "Healthcare Disruptor Buys Out Legacy Club, Redefines Power in One Afternoon." Darcy tried damage control, of course. A painfully polished Instagram post, "Families grow, families shift. We're grateful for change even when it's uncomfortable." She didn't tag me, but she did tag the pavilion, which now belonged to me. Calls came in from people who'd ignored me for years, distant cousins, old classmates, even my mother's bridge partner, who wrote a 3-paragraph email apologizing on behalf of the generational patterns that led to all this. It was bizarre. I used to dream of this moment, the sudden spotlight, the overdue acknowledgement. But now that it had arrived, all I wanted was to get back to work. And that's exactly what I did. At Northbridge, we held a ribbon-cutting event for our first mobile clinic unit. Jolene cut the ribbon herself. She wore the same rust-colored dress she'd worn to the baby shower, like a quiet protest turned into armor. The press was modest but respectful. We didn't need headlines, we needed reach. We converted the old pavilion ballroom into a public health space. Every Sunday, the room where my parents once hosted holiday galas now pulsed with life. Free eye exams, nutrition classes, community yoga for seniors. One little boy came in, holding his mom's hand. He looked up at me and asked if the big pretty building was a school. I crouched down beside him and said, "It can be whatever you want it to be." That's what the old version of me never understood. Power isn't just taking back what was stolen, it's creating what never existed before. But my family didn't disappear entirely. No, they lingered, quietly. My mother sent another letter. This one shorter than the last. "You've made your point. We hope you won't humiliate us further." No signature, no warmth. I didn't respond, because I finally understood that silence can be a boundary. I didn't owe them more than I had already given. They had tried to define me through their rejection, and I had let them, for far too long. But now I was busy. Too busy building something real to rehearse their version of love anymore. One evening, Jolene walked into my office holding 2 mugs of tea. She sat on the couch and asked, "Do you think they'll ever apologize?" I shook my head gently. "No. And that's okay." She looked at me. "Really?" I met her gaze. Because if they did, it would be to make them feel better. Not you. Not me, she nodded, then smiled. Good. I don't want it anyway. That's when I realized something huge. Jolene had never truly been broken by them. I had. She was just waiting for me to catch up. The world they tried to keep us out of? We were rebuilding it, brick by brick, on our terms. Not just with healthcare and clinics, but with truth. With dignity. With a kind of legacy you can't fake with monogrammed napkins and curated photo albums. A legacy that starts with saying, no more. I no longer needed to explain myself to anyone. Not even to them. Because walking away from their table didn't leave me empty. It made room for everything real to begin. It's funny how loud silence can be when you're finally surrounded by people who love you the right way. That evening, after the last of the Sunday health fair had been packed up and the lights dimmed in the pavilion, we all sat on folding chairs in what used to be the yacht club's grand foyer, now our community welcome hall. Paper lanterns dangled from the ceiling. Half-empty pizza boxes crowded the folding table. Someone had brought homemade brownies in a tin with a cracked snowman sticker. It was, without a doubt, the happiest I'd ever been in that building. Mara was still wearing her stethoscope like a necklace. Luke was showing off photos of his newborn. One of our new volunteers, an undergrad nursing student named Talia, was singing badly along to a Fleetwood Mac song playing from someone's phone. The whole place felt alive. Then there was Jolene, cross-legged on the floor, laptop balanced on one knee, typing furiously. Finalizing the newsletter? I asked. Yep, she said. Headline is, the pavilion is now ours, no boat shoes required. Too much? I laughed so hard I choked on my water. This was family. Not by blood, by choice. These people didn't care where I ranked in some invisible hierarchy. They didn't want my silence or my apologies. They just wanted me, fully. Imperfectly, completely. And in return, I wanted them. That's the thing about chosen family. They don't erase the pain of the old one. But they make space for something better to grow around it. Like roots curling around a broken pipe, forming something new. A few days later, Jolene and I hosted a dinner at our apartment. Nothing fancy. Pasta, garlic bread, chocolate mousse from a box. But everyone came, the whole team. A few patients turned friends. Even the grumpy pharmacist from down the street who once told me my eyebrows were too intense for pediatrics. Jolene set the table herself, placing handwritten cards at every seat. Mine said, to the woman who taught me how to fight without fists. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but I didn't. Instead, I stood up and raised my glass. Thank you, I said. All of you. Not just for helping build this clinic, or this team, or this weird little family, but for reminding me that I never had to prove myself to be worth something. Mara clinked her glass against mine. You didn't have to prove anything, Marlene. You built it. Later that night, after the dishes were stacked in the sink and the laughter had settled into a gentle hum, Jolene sat beside me on the couch, barefoot and sleepy. She asked, do you think they'll ever really go away? I knew who she meant. My parents, Graham. The ghost of their judgment that still occasionally brushed the back of my neck. I thought about it, then said, I don't think they go away. I think we get louder than them. She smiled. We already are. And she was right. Because the difference between biological and chosen isn't just who shows up when things are good. It's who stays when you have nothing left to prove. Who loves you not for your resume, but your refusal to stay small. Who hands you a glass of water after you've burned every bridge worth walking away from, and says, welcome home. That night I slept better than I had in years. No dreams, no ghosts, just a kind of peace that hums through your bones. Because sometimes the best families are the ones we create out of the wreckage. You don't always need to slam a door to close it. Sometimes you just stop knocking. In the weeks following the baby shower, I found myself rewiring my instincts. I no longer reached for my phone when something good happened. No more checking to see if my mother had finally watched the clinic's feature on the local news. No more wondering if Graham had read the op-ed Jolene wrote that went semi-viral on teen advocacy boards. No more imagining that anyone from the family might call just to say you were right. Because I didn't need them to. What I needed, what I finally gave myself, was permission to disengage. Setting boundaries didn't come naturally. I was raised to believe that endurance equaled love. that tolerating mistreatment was a virtue, that speaking up was disrespectful. But now, every time I said no or didn't reply or left a message unread, I felt stronger, not colder, clearer. It began small. I muted the family group thread, left it a week later without announcement. Darcy texted, "Hope that wasn't personal." I didn't answer. I canceled my parents' emergency contact status at the clinic, replaced them with Mara. She cried when I told her, said it was the most emotionally stable decision anyone's made in this building all year. I changed the locks on my apartment, not because they ever had a key, but because the symbolism felt good. I stopped accepting guilt as a form of inheritance. One morning, Jolene came into the kitchen to find me rearranging the bookshelf. I was pulling down the old photo albums, wedding photos I was barely in, family reunions I had been cropped out of, birthdays where I took all the photos and was in none of them. She watched silently as I packed them into a box. "Donating?" she asked. "No," I said, "storing." She raised an eyebrow. "Someday," I told her, "you'll want to know who they were, maybe not to forgive them, but to understand how far we've come." She nodded, then added, "Can I draw on the box?" And she did. A huge black marker label, "Do not open until never." We laughed until we cried. That same week, I received an official letter from my father's estate advisor. It was dry, legal, formal. "As you have made clear, you are no longer interested in participating in future trust-related family disbursements. Please acknowledge that this waives your claims to family holdings moving forward." I read it twice, laughed once, signed it without a second thought. It felt like shedding a skin that never fit right to begin with. Because the truth was, my real wealth didn't come from inheritance. It came from integrity, from creation, from community, from every patient who hugged me after a checkup, every mother who thanked me for listening, every intern who stayed late because they believed in what we were building. And most of all, it came from Jolene. Watching her grow, not in spite of me, but with me, was the purest return on investment I'd ever known. She was my legacy, not a last name, not a trust fund. Her eyes held truth, her hands built futures. Her voice didn't shake, and now, neither did mine. By the end of the month, the pavilion was fully transformed. We held our first youth leadership summit on its balcony, where Graham once toasted to the Jennings legacy. I stood in the back this time. Let the teens take the spotlight. Jolene gave the keynote. She opened with, "Your family might not see you, that doesn't mean you're invisible. It just means you have to find or build the mirror that reflects you back whole." People cried. I didn't. I just held her backpack and felt the kind of pride that didn't need to be shared to be real. I didn't need their money, their validation, their seat at the table. I was the table now, and I was choosing carefully who got a place. I never set out to reclaim a legacy. I just wanted to survive, without apologizing for my existence. But somewhere along the way, between the stolen fund, the baby shower fallout, and the day we turned a yacht club into a free health hub, I realized that survival wasn't the finish line. It was the starting point. If the Jennings name had once meant exclusion, silence, and smoke and mirror reputations, I was going to rewrite it. Letter by letter. Patient by patient. Day by day. It started with a wall. A literal one. Inside the pavilion, just past the welcome desk where visitors used to sign in for tennis lessons, I had a mural commissioned. It stretched 20 feet wide and 10 feet high. The paint was still fresh the morning we unveiled it. A kaleidoscope of color, abstract faces, open hands, eyes wide with wonder. At the top, in soft handwritten font, it read, "Legacy is what you build when no one's clapping." I gave a short speech to the crowd that day, told them the truth. That I was raised to believe legacy was something you inherited. But now I knew better. Legacy was about what you give away, not what you hoard, what you grow in others, not what you preserve for a nameplate. I founded the Jolene Jennings Initiative the following month, a full-ride scholarship program for first-generation students going into healthcare and public service. We started with 6 kids. One of them, Kaylin, had been working 2 jobs to help her grandmother buy insulin. She cried when we handed her the offer letter. So did I. Every recipient got something else too, a handwritten note from Jolene. Her first batch read, "You're not here because someone opened a door. You're here because someone refused to let it stay closed." She made her own cards on recycled paper, said it felt better than brochures. Mara and Luke teased me about being sentimental, but they chipped in too. Look started a mentorship program for teen boys. Mara led Sunday morning hikes where people talked more than they walked, and healing somehow happened in both. Even our patients began to give back. One elderly couple donated a set of encyclopedias. A third-grade teacher brought her class for a field trip and left us with 22 handmade thank you cards taped to our walls. And then came the article, the one that caught fire. A mid-level editor at a national magazine wrote a piece titled "The Woman Who Turned Family Rejection into Community Power." They included an old photo, me in scrubs, hair pulled back, Jolene sitting on my lap with juice stains on her shirt and a crayon tucked behind her ear. We looked messy, happy, real. That photo traveled, it got shared, quoted, someone made it their desktop background, someone else used it as the cover slide for a TEDx presentation. A college invited Jolene to speak, and just like that the name Jennings started meaning something different. Not because of what it had been, but because of what we'd turned it into. Still, not everyone applauded. There were trolls, of course. Strangers with too much time and too little empathy. Even a cousin messaged me, "All this for attention? You really think you're the hero here?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because the hero narrative was never the point. The point was creating a space so strong, so full of purpose, that no one could dismantle it by simply refusing to acknowledge it. One afternoon as I was locking up, Jolene came to my office. She sat on the corner of my desk and held up a dusty envelope. "This came for you," she said. "Old address. Guess it finally caught up." I opened it. Inside was a check. Unsigned, blank memo line, 6 figures, sent from a bank my family had used for generations. No note, just a number. I turned it over, tore it in half, dropped it in the shredder without flinching. Jolene raised an eyebrow. "I already cashed the check that mattered," I said. She grinned. "The one with the pavilion?" "No," I replied. "The one with your name on it." Because that was the real inheritance, not land, not stocks, not status, but legacy with intention, one that chose healing over bitterness, creation over competition, purpose over pedigree, and I would protect that with everything I had. The funny thing about peace is that you don't always notice when it arrives. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It doesn't wave a banner and declare victory. It seeps in, quiet and persistent, filling the cracks that used to ache. It shows up in the spaces where hurt used to live. For me, peace arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. No milestone, no big reveal. Just sunlight pouring through the clinic's skylight while Jolene sat across from me, filling out her college applications with the same intensity she once used to sharpen colored pencils. Her hair was piled in a messy bun, a pencil behind one ear, earbuds dangling from the other. She looked calm, unbothered, whole. And I realized I was too. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies. Not for recognition. Not even for closure. I had built my own. The baby shower, the betrayal, the fallout, it all felt distant now. Not erased, but archived. Like a book I'd already read, whose ending no longer surprised me. I no longer wondered what might have happened if my parents had chosen differently. I knew what happened because I had chosen differently. I chose to stay, to fight, to grow, to believe in the kind of love that doesn't require performance. I chose Jolene. And more importantly, I chose myself. There were still hard days, of course. Running a clinic isn't glamorous, the funding is fickle, the burnout is real, and grief has a way of knocking even when you've locked every door. But I no longer mistook struggle for failure. One day, Jolene asked me, "What would you have done if we hadn't gotten the pavilion?" I smiled. Opened a mobile van clinic. Painted it blue. Called it the Stolen Fund. She laughed so hard she dropped her laptop. We didn't need the pavilion. We just needed the chance to prove, first to ourselves, then to the world, that we weren't who they said we were. I still get letters from people. Women, nurses, single moms, strangers who write, "I thought I was alone. Your story reminded me I'm not crazy. You gave me language for something I couldn't explain." And every time I write back. Not with advice, but with this. You are not invisible. Your story is valid, and you don't need anyone's permission to rise. Because rising doesn't have to be public. Sometimes it just means getting out of bed, showing up, breathing, choosing better. One morning, I caught Jolene looking in the mirror. She was testing out lipstick for prom, a soft coral that she said made her feel like a girl in charge of a sci-fi revolution. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. She caught my gaze in the mirror. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, "just proud." And it was the kind of pride that didn't need anyone else to echo it, because it wasn't built for display, it was built for her. For me. For the quiet revolution we lived every single day. Not with revenge, but with peace. True, earned, soul-deep peace.